Some training methods not only don't help, but they destroy your relationship with your dog. This is what happened to Dino and his mom after they had several trainers, and all of them gave them tips and tricks to resolve Dino's reactivity. But what it did was Dino got completely disconnected from his mom. He would no longer want to have anything to do with her, and I want to introduce them as an example of how wrong training can go and how we can do this differently. So stay tuned and have fun. Alright, so Dino was a 1.5-year-old Rottweiler, and this means he was still in his teenage years, right? And they are kind of annoying as teenagers. Some of them are, at least. And they definitely question who they can trust and who they should better stay away from. And specific training methods, and in Dino's case, it was yanking on the leash whenever he would look at other dogs. He didn't even have to growl or bark or jump or whatever. He just looked at them, and that was the first trigger for corrections for him. That was what his mom had been taught by 4 different trainers. And that is happening in a country where this is not allowed by law. So I don't know how she ended up with 4 of them, but it happened. So it wasn't the only thing. Dino was also not allowed to ask for pets. He was not allowed to come onto the sofa or the bed. He had been sleeping in the bed with his mom as a puppy. But when the issues on leash started, all of the trainers told her she cannot let him sleep in the bed. One of them even suggested locking him up in some kind of basement laundry room, which is, again, a little, well, weird. And Dino's mom thought so too, so she didn't do that. They told her that she had to walk right through Dino, so whenever he lay anywhere or stood somewhere she wanted to go, she just had to walk right through him. She didn't need to tell him to get out of the way or tell him what to do. She just had to walk right through him, and he would have to figure out what this is all about. And to practice her leadership and him not getting distracted, she was to stand in front of Dino, and he had to stand. He was not allowed to sit down for half an hour without a break or without anything, and he had to stare at her. And if he didn't, she was to yank his leash again. And again, this was something she didn't do because it was boring for her and she felt weird about it. So, great job, because it's a completely useless exercise. It will not do anything in terms of keeping him from lunging, barking, growling at other dogs. It will not strengthen their bond. It will not establish any kind of leadership. And again, there is no leadership between human and dog that has to be established. Our dogs are completely dependent on us. We don't need to show them who's boss. It's not necessary because they don't want to overpower us or anything. It's not how they rule. It's not how they work. It's just not happening. So she didn't do that. But she did the yanking on leash. She was taught that Dino was not allowed to relieve himself when they go for a walk for at least 15 minutes. And during these 15 minutes, he had to walk heel, not looking at her, but pretty much not looking at anything. He was not allowed to sniff. He was not allowed to look at anything. Whenever he turned his head, she was taught to yank on the leash again. She was not very consistent in doing that, which was great, but all these techniques, what they did was they taught Dino that he did not have a reliable and empathetic and compassionate team player by his side helping him. He was living with somebody who could not be trusted, right? Because if somebody abuses you on a regular basis, you will not trust them. That's just nature. And constant yanking on a leash is abuse. They can call it corrections all they want. There is nothing other than pain that's making the dog stop behaving. This is how those corrections work. They work over pain or fear. Otherwise, they don't. So, again, this is just simple biology. And in Dino's case, they didn't really work because when a dog got too close, he would still lunge and bark and growl, and he was a big boy. He was, even for a Rottweiler, he was really big. And with really big, I mean 55 kilos or 121 pounds. So he did not outweigh his mom, but wrestling with a 55 kilogram dog or a 121 pounds dog is difficult. Let's just call it that. So this leash correcting thing did not work, but it still hurt him. And he had to go to a chiropractor regularly, always because of some blocked joints in the neck. But the trainers, his mom even asked them, and they said it has nothing to do with it, which is wrong. The chiropractor also suggested switching to a harness, but the trainer said a harness doesn't work because a harness is just for pulling, which is not true. There is no such thing as a pull reflex or anything if the dog gets on a harness. It's just how you train them or how you treat them and how you handle them. Dogs can learn how to walk on a loose leash with a harness just fine. It's not harder or anything to teach them. But, alright, I'm getting a little sidetracked. So, Dino's mom tried really hard to do what the trainers told her, except for those things that felt really fishy to her. And it still didn't work. But what Dino learned was he can't trust her, and whenever he was off leash or in the garden or anywhere he could run, he would run away from her and he would not engage with her at all because there was no reason to. He would not get anything out of that. And since she was not allowed to pet him when he came up to her, he stopped that. So they were living completely separate lives under one roof. Which is kind of sad, right? Because we don't get dogs to ignore them all day and be ignored by them all day. This is not how we want to live our lives together. This is not how we imagine being a team with our dog looks like. But alright, that's not when she got concerned. She got concerned when another exercise got Dino to start redirecting onto her. And that was, since the leash yankings didn't work, whenever Dino got into his staring mode, she was supposed to notch him. That's what they called it. It was a punch in the kidney area. And she didn't do that very firmly, but as he was staring and she touched him, She really was touching him. It was not a punch from her, so she actually did that wrong. If you asked the trainers, Dino would turn around and go after her. Now he was muzzled because it's necessary for Rottweilers by law here to wear a muzzle outside, which was good because otherwise he would definitely have bitten her. And that was when she decided that things have to change. So we got rid of everything. It was really hard for her because she had spent a year and a half trying her best to do all those techniques and all those methods she didn't feel comfortable to begin with. And now she had to unlearn everything. And Dino had to learn that he could actually trust her. And that from now on, things would change. So we switched to a harness and a regular collar because Dino was so big, she needed to have 2 leashes on in case he would go crazy again. And they took a break from everything for a pretty long time. In the beginning, they were just at home doing everything that would increase their bond and relationship. So she regularly invited Dino to come up to her and get his pets. He got food toys again, he got regular toys again, he would have access to them whenever he wanted. He was allowed on the bed again. He did not do that. And we're not 100% sure if it's because he had some issues with his knees or if it's because it was just not for him anymore. But he started to come up to her a little hesitantly in the beginning, but he tried. And this time, he made a different experience. This time, he made the experience that whenever he would ask for pets, he would get them. And she would engage with him. She would ask him to move when she really had to walk where he was lying or where he was standing. And he happily did that. It was not anything they needed to train. She just told him to step away and he did. So the whole walking through him was not necessary to begin with. But alright. And they did not walk in their neighborhood for a pretty long time because she wanted to feel like they have a connection again before she started training in the neighborhood. So what they did was they drove a little bit every day, or she tried to do it every day, to a parking lot for hikers, and they started walking there. During the week, they didn't meet anybody, and on weekends, she tried to go really early or very late or skip the walk. And what they did was just do things together, sniffing games and running together and playing together, and she would catch every single look he gave her with a marker signal and reward him for it, either with a praise or with a treat or with a toy. She would show interest in what he liked to sniff, and it took him a while to start sniffing because he had learned that whenever he tried to sniff, he would get yanked on the leash, right? So getting him to do that again was a little bit of a challenge, and they achieved that with nose work and search games. Very easy ones. And she would also praise whenever he lowered his head to the ground for those things. And that was when he started to feel safe again around her and started to feel safe again with putting his head near the ground. So he got a little bit more confident around her, and of course nosework and food toys and all those things, they increase confidence. And when we get a confident dog, we get a more reliable dog, because a confident dog doesn't have to overreact. And what Dino started to show again, and this was really heartwarming, it was so beautiful to see. He started to show a smile again, and he started to be goofy again. Again, this was a 1.5-year-old dog, a big dog, so he was still a teenager. He was not nearly grown up in his head. So seeing him act like a young dog again was so beautiful. And after a while, when he had gained enough trust, so he would engage with his mom regularly, and he would look at her and he would ask her what to do or where to go during their walks together, she started to trust him again too. And they started first using a long line again, because he would not pull, he would not go crazy, because there was nothing to go crazy about. He was not that interested in wildlife, and he was really happy to do something with her. So whenever she started training just a word for attention, so she could ask him to look at her, it was done in no time. He was so happy to do something together that he learned super fast. And that way they just bonded again. His mom realized that she could actually ask things of him and he would do them happily. She didn't need to be strict, she didn't need to correct, she didn't need to do anything aversive to him. He would just happily do whatever she asked, if she just asked. And he realized that working with her was actually rewarding. It was fun for him to do what his mom asked, and so he was really happy to do it. And he would even start to try to get her to play with him. It was so adorable. He would come up to her and just touch her hand with his nose very lightly and look up at her with these mischievous eyes. He would have this sparkle in his eyes that just told her he was about to goof around. And that's what young dogs do, right? That's what they're supposed to do. So whenever he did that, and she felt like it, she just started running, and he would start to run after her and let her chase him and all those fun games. She once told me that they were doing that and there was somebody walking by, a hiker, and he would start smiling and she stopped because it was a little bit embarrassing for her. And they started chatting, and he told her that it was so great to see somebody actually have fun with a dog. And isn't that kind of sad? I mean, are we really so burdened by everything our dogs do? And are we really so into being the boss or being whatever and suppressing our dog's actual personality or character or whatever you want to call it, that we have forgotten to have fun with our dogs? I want you to tell me in the comments, we're not done yet, but I want you to tell me in the comments what is actually fun that you do with your dog on a regular basis. And if you don't have anything yet, what you want to try. Think about it, tell me in the comments. But what we haven't talked about yet was the lunging, barking, growling, right? Because that wasn't gone. It would have been beautiful, but it wasn't. Dino still got tense when he saw another dog. And it wasn't because he was aggressive or dangerous or whatever. He just wanted to play so badly. And he didn't know how to stay calm around other dogs. It was just something he never learned. So he would tense up. And of course, since he was used to corrections, he tensed up even more. Because if somebody yanks at you and you're tense, it's easier to ignore. That was what Dino was doing. So it was kind of a self-preservation technique. But this is not what we want from our dogs, right? We want them to just ignore the other dog, walk past the other dog, whatever. So for Dino, what worked best was doing nose work and teaching him that way that he could just lower his head to the ground and be very polite to the other dog, because taking the head down is polite, right? And then walk in a curve. It was all Dino needed. There was no very long training process, and since he had gained trust in general, and especially when his mom wanted something from him, the moment she talked to him, the tension would get less. He would loosen up. So whenever they got too close to another dog and he tensed up, she just asked him to look at her and then invited him to do a little nose work. And he was happy to do that. And that way they got closer and closer and closer to the other dog, and then they could start to walk in a curve past the other dog. Usually there's a lot more training involved than that. He was really not a tough case. He was just a little bit misunderstood. And maybe it was because of his breed, because he was a big dog. And maybe people just sometimes want to interpret something into big, strong dogs that's not there. And we have those breed lists with breeds that are supposedly dangerous and that have very strict laws, which is, in my opinion, completely ridiculous. And Dino's case showed once again that only because he's a Rottweiler and only because he's big and strong and black, his lunging, barking, growling is not worse than when a Chihuahua does it. I've had Chihuahuas in training that needed way more training, way more distance, and even had one that as soon as I put a foot over the doorstep would be attached to my pants because he would have bitten me if it weren't for very strong pants. So it's not the breed, it's just what they learn, how they feel, and how we help them. So as soon as Dino had a different strategy and would no longer get frustrated because he couldn't get to the other dog, he calmed down and he was able to walk just past them without making a fuss. So I wish you a lot of fun training, because if we have fun, it's way easier and we get to our dogs way faster. And we'll see each other next time. Bye!